Derek, the King of Dudley, was one of the loveliest kings there ever was. He was a king who was never too busy for anyone. Nobody was ever turned away from Dudley Castle. Even stray dragons were taken in. Everyone in the kingdom of Dudley was very happy. Well, nearly everyone. The only person who was not happy was King Derek himself. You see, he had a very pretty wife called Queen Queenie, but could not understand how such a beautiful queen could love a little chubby bold man, especially one with such an enormous nose. The sorry truth was that King Derek's nose was bigger than any other nose in Dudley, and it made him sad. One morning, King Derek and Queen Queenie were having breakfast when King Derek saw an interesting advert in his newspaper, the Royal Gazette. It read, "Wonder Wizards make all things wonderful." The king thought that maybe Wonder Wizards could make him handsome and not have an enormous nose. Everything in the room started to shake like jelly, even Queen Queenie as she was drinking her cup of tea. Then suddenly everything stopped shaking like a jelly, and instead nothing moved at all. Even Queen Queenie was not moving. She had frozen still like a statue. Only King Derek was moving, and he was just about to flick Queen Queenie to see if she really had become a statue, when a funny-looking small purple man with a very pointy chin appeared from nowhere. The man introduced himself in a squeaky voice as Preston, the Purple Wizard from Wonder Wizards. The wizard told King Derek that he could make him handsome, but it would cost him. Preston, the Purple Wizard, promised the king that he would make him the most handsome king in all the land. King Derek smiled and asked about the cost of this spell, even though he was a very rich king. The surprising answer was that for him to be the most handsome king in all the land, it would cost King Derek no money at all. Instead, from that day on, he would be forced to say the word hedgehog at the end of every sentence. King Derek thought about this, but before he could say yes to the wizard, there was a very loud bang. Then the funny-looking small purple man with a very pointy chin had vanished. Suddenly everything in the room started to move again, and everything returned to normal, including Queen Queenie. But the king was disappointed that everything, including his enormous nose, was exactly the same as it was before. It was nearly 8:20 when King Derek woke up the next morning, and he felt slightly strange. He didn't know why he felt like this, but his head seemed lighter, and his face felt strangely smooth. Then he noticed that his nightshirt was surprisingly loose on his body, and more worryingly, rather short. Things were not as they should be, but when King Derek looked in the mirror, he was delighted with what he saw. Standing in front of him was not a short, chubby, bold man with an enormous nose, but a very handsome king. King Derek excitedly ran downstairs to show off his new looks to Queen Queenie. But before the king got to the royal parlour, he was grabbed by one of his own guards. He ordered Guard Gordon to release the king at once, but Guard Gordon just laughed. It did not help that the king had said the word hedgehog at the end of the sentence. Guard Gordon said that if he was King Derek, then where was his enormous nose? King Derek protested and tried not to say the word hedgehog again, but he could not resist it. He was taken to the Dudley Castle dungeons. For 4 days, King Derek remained captive in the Dudley Castle dungeons, making the guards laugh every time he said hedgehog. Everyone blamed the handsome prisoner for the strange disappearance of lovely King Derek. Queen Queenie was beside herself with worry about her missing husband. Everyone in the kingdom of Dudley was very upset. The saddest person of all, however, was King Derek himself. Feeling sorry for the prisoner, Guard Gordon let King Derek read the Royal Gazette, and it was then that the king's eyes noticed a familiar advert which read, "Wonder Wizards make all things wonderful." The king started to think that maybe he could get Preston, the Purple Wizard, to put things right. Suddenly, everything in the room started to shake like a jelly. Then everything fell still, and even the birds flying outside the prison window stopped frozen in mid-air. As King Derek had hoped, a funny-looking small purple man with a very pointed chin appeared. It was Preston, the Purple Wizard. The king asked Preston, the Purple Wizard, if he could change back the spell that made him the most handsome king, and instead have a bald head and enormous nose again. But Preston, the Purple Wizard, told him no, and explained that it was a Wonder Wizard Company policy never to change spells back. King Derek looked sad, and then asked how the wizard could help him, followed by the word hedgehog. Preston, the Purple Wizard, simply asked the king what he wanted most. King Derek thought hard about this and said he just wanted everyone to treat him like a king again. The wizard nodded his head before reminding the king that there would be a cost. King Derek asked what the cost would be. Preston, the Purple Wizard, checked his Wonder Wizard spellbook before responding that he could do this for just a finger on the nose. But before King Derek could ask about the finger on the nose, there was a loud bang. The birds outside started to move again, and Preston, the Purple Wizard, disappeared. Sadly, the king was still in the Dudley Castle dungeons, so he returned to his bed. Next morning the king was woken up by the sound of a bird singing, but found he was still in the dungeon. The only thing that King Derek felt was different was that his little finger on his left hand appeared to be stuck to his new, handsome nose. Try as he might, King Derek could not remove his little finger from the end of his nose. It was as if it was stuck with the stickiest glue in the whole of Dudley. To King Derek's surprise, the Dudley Castle dungeon door swung open and in walked Queen Queenie. She was smiling and started to apologise to King Derek. He thought that Queen Queenie had realised who he was despite his good looks, and wished he could remove his finger from his nose. Queen Queenie seemed to know that he was a king, but believed he was a visiting king. Queen Queenie was calling him King Tommy of Tipton, and saying sorry that they had put him in the dungeon. King Derek accepted the apology, but with his finger on his nose and the last word being hedgehog, everybody must have thought he was a little bit strange. That night, Queen Queenie held a big dinner for their visiting king, who continued to have his finger on his nose and say the word hedgehog at the end of each sentence. Still, the king was glad that he was finally able to talk to his wife, even if she didn't know who he was. Queen Queenie liked this king, but kept saying how she was missing her King Derek. The king decided to tell Queen Queenie that he had seen the King of Dudley last week, and they had agreed to do a king swap for the week for charity. Queen Queenie looked very surprised by this news, but she was glad to know her husband was safe and tried not to laugh at the word hedgehog. For the next 3 days, King Derek enjoyed his time as a guest at his own Dudley Castle and being shown the sights of Dudley. The Dudley public lined the streets to wave at the royal visitor, all amazed by the fact that his little finger was always on his nose. Many put their little fingers on their noses back at the king as a sign of respect. It was the final night of the pretend king swap, and King Derek was sitting in the guest chamber of Dudley Castle. The king knew he had to find a way of getting his old life back. It was time to call again on Wonder Wizards to try and fix it, so he opened his newspaper, the Royal Gazette, once more. There it was in the middle of page 27, just below news on the birth of 3 corgi puppies at Cannock Castle. The advert read, "Wonder Wizards make all things wonderful." Everything in the room started to shake like a jelly. Suddenly everything stopped moving and froze. Even Cassie, the Dudley Castle cat, who had been licking her paw, stayed still like a statue. Then a funny-looking small purple man with a very pointed chin appeared. King Derek begged Preston, the Purple Wizard, to change him back to looking like he used to look, with his bald head and his enormous nose. Again, the wizard reminded the king that it was a Wonder Wizard policy never to change spells back. Preston, the Purple Wizard, then asked King Derek what he really wanted. The king thought about it and asked the wizard if he had a spell that would make Queen Queenie believe everything he said, so that she would know who he really was. Preston, the Purple Wizard, took out his Wonder Wizard spellbook and flicked through the pages. He then told King Derek that he could do such a spell, but it was quite a costly one. King Derek smiled, but was worried what else he might have to do as well as keep his little finger on his nose and finish every sentence with the word hedgehog. The wizard told the king the cost. From that day on, every time anybody entered the room, he would say a nursery rhyme. So the king knew that he could tell Queen Queenie the truth, but would end up saying lots of nursery rhymes. King Derek was about to agree when there was a very loud bang, and the funny-looking small purple man with a very pointed chin disappeared. It was a bright sunny morning in the kingdom of Dudley when King Derek woke up in the guest chamber. He stretched the arm that wasn't attached to his nose and smiled, knowing that today was the day that Queen Queenie would know who he was. Billy the butler knocked on his chamber door and entered carrying a silver tray with a cup of tea for the royal visitor. The king was about to say thank you, but instead he strangely started saying all the words to the grand old Duke of York, and he could not stop. Billy the butler then heard this handsome king, with his finger on his nose, end the nursery rhyme by saying the word hedgehog. He thought that Tipton must be a very strange place. King Derek joined Queen Queenie for what she thought was a special goodbye breakfast. Outside, the king could see that quite a crowd was starting to gather. The reason the people of Dudley were gathering outside Dudley Castle was that they were preparing to welcome back their most beloved king, King Derek, the King of Dudley. They could not wait to greet again that little chubby bold man with the enormous nose who they loved so much. Queen Queenie was so glad that she would soon be seeing her husband, and politely tried to ask the king when he would be leaving. King Derek did not really say, and instead said she looked extra lovely today. For some reason, Queen Queenie believed everything this handsome-looking man said this morning, so she thought she really must be appearing extra lovely. King Derek was struggling to eat his breakfast with his finger on his nose. Things were not helped when Billy the butler entered the room carrying more toast. Queen Queenie was very surprised when King Derek started saying hot cross buns and about how they cost 1 a penny, 2 a penny. After King Derek ended his sentence with hedgehog, Queen Queenie ordered Billy the butler to go and buy some of these cheap hot cross buns for the king to take with him on his journey back to Tipton. King Derek decided it was time to tell Queen Queenie that he was her husband. Queen Queenie listened carefully to the funny man who held his little finger to his nose and who repeated nursery rhymes and finished every sentence with the word hedgehog, and believed him when he said he was King Derek. He did not look like King Derek and was a lot taller, but still the Queen believed him. Just then, Billy the butler returned to the Dudley Castle dining room, and Queen Queenie decided to tell him who their visitor really was. But before she could talk, King Derek started to talk about an owl and a pussycat going to sea in a beautiful pea-green boat. He did not stop until he had finished the whole of the nursery rhyme and ended with the word hedgehog. Queen Queenie then stood up and said they should paint Dudley Castle pea-green. Billy the butler was clearly surprised by this. Billy the butler was even more surprised when the Queen told him that the handsome man with the little finger on his nose was King Derek. Through the window they could see the crowd was getting larger. King Derek was so glad that Queen Queenie believed who he was. He told the Queen about what had happened with Preston, the purple wizard from Wonder Wizards. The Queen was sad that King Derek had felt he needed to change the way he looked. She told him how much she loved his enormous nose and his little bald head. With Queen Queenie by his side, King Derek spoke to the crowd at the Dudley Castle gates. The crowd was sad to still see King Tommy of Tipton and just wanted their King Derek of Dudley back. It got worse when the man with the golden locks and his little finger on his nose started to say that he was King Derek. The large crowd became very angry indeed when King Derek said the word hedgehog and then started to tell them how Simple Simon met a pieman. King Derek was feeling quite sad now, as it was the first time he had seen his people hate him. How could he have been so silly to want to change the way he looked? Back inside Dudley Castle, Queen Queenie picked up the day's copy of the Royal Gazette. She was looking for a certain advert, and soon she saw it. The advert read, "Wonder Wizards make all things wonderful." The Queen could not believe how silly her husband had been, and just wanted her old King Derek back. Suddenly, everything in the room, including Gordon the guard, started to shake like a jelly, and then everyone but Queen Queenie froze like a statue. Out of nowhere, a funny-looking small purple man with a very pointed chin appeared before Queen Queenie. The man introduced himself in a squeaky voice as Preston, the purple wizard from Wonder Wizards. Queen Queenie asked Preston the Purple Wizard if he could change her husband back to how he used to be, with his baldy head and enormous nose. The wizard simply shook his head and told her that it was a Wonder Wizard Company policy never to change spells back. Queen Queenie was not impressed and responded that this was a new spell for her and not in fact changing a spell back. Preston the Purple Wizard looked puzzled. He tried to think of a reason not to offer this wish. Eventually he decided he could not, so instead told the Queen that it would cost quite a lot. Queen Queenie said she did not care what it cost. She just wanted King Derek back to the way he used to be, with his lovely baldy head and his enormous nose. Preston the Purple Wizard did a quick sum and then told the Queen the cost. From this day on, she would have to do a cartwheel whenever anybody said the word yes. Before Queen Queenie could agree to the cost, there was a very loud bang. Preston the Purple Wizard had disappeared, and Guard Gordon started moving again. Queen Queenie was sad to still see a very handsome chap with his finger on his nose, a nose that was sadly not enormous. The next morning, Queen Queenie was still half asleep when she asked King Derek if he was awake. The king stretched and said the word yes. Instantly, Queen Queenie jumped out of bed and surprisingly performed a cartwheel across the wooden floor of the bedroom. The king raised his hands in shock and then realised that his little finger was no longer stuck to his nose. The Queen looked at King Derek and a big smile spread across her face. The king knew straight away what this smile meant. It was a smile that told him that he had an enormous nose, baldy head, and round belly again. Queen Queenie was delighted to have her husband back. The king shouted aloud yes, and did not follow up by saying the word hedgehog. The Queen did a cartwheel. After breakfast, King Derek and Queen Queenie stepped out on the Dudley Castle balcony. The large crowd all cheered to see their much-loved King of Dudley back. Now everyone in the kingdom of Dudley was very happy, and that included Derek, with his enormous nose.